Previously, on Another Dead Man Walking.
My main goal was to make sure that the whole world knew that I was innocent.
12 jurors unanimously convicted Richard Glossip.
This was a one-sided fight that the government waged against Mr. Glossip, and they got what they wanted.
He's clearly innocent. The governor of Oklahoma is just a horrible person.
I'm Ian Woods, and I'm very relieved. If you've been following these podcasts, I'm sure you'll have heard the news. 3 hours before Richard Glossip was due to be executed, an Oklahoma court issued a 14-day stay of execution.
How do you like that? 2 weeks, but I'll take it. You know what? We're going to get our evidence in front of a judge. That would be all we really wanted. Great job. Great job.
No, I was saying, look at that guy. He's been in the red dirt of Oklahoma. He's covered with red dirt.
Get over here, Kathleen Lord. You're part of that group, man.
It's been a roller coaster of a week in Oklahoma. I'll have the inside story, and what a dramatic story it is. Where to start? Well, let's go back to Monday morning.
There's a lot of people here, and I think that shows how really important this matter is.
A news conference in the echoey halls of the state capitol in Oklahoma City. Reporters had come to hear Attorney Don Knight lay out what he said was new evidence in the case.
This man is innocent. We've done a lot of work in order to make that determination, but he is.
It was a punchy start, but it didn't last. The lawyer spoke like he was in a courtroom, laying out all the evidence in great detail. But this was a news conference. Impatient reporters shuffled in their seats as he recapped information he'd sent out by email 3 days earlier. First, an affidavit from a man called Richard Barrett, who was a regular visitor to the Best Budget Inn around the time of the murder. Barrett was a drug dealer, and one of the places he did business was Room 102, where Barry Van Treese was later to die. Richard Barrett says Justin Sneed was well known for breaking into rooms and cars to steal anything that he could sell to feed his methamphetamine addiction.
Because of the amount of drugs Justin Sneed bought and what he saw, there was no doubt in his mind that Justin Sneed was addicted to methamphetamine. He told us that people with this addiction stay awake for days or weeks and will do anything to get more of the drug. Even kill.
Barrett didn't give evidence to the authorities about the murder of Barry Van Treese because to do so would have implicated himself in drug dealing. He did end up in jail, is currently on parole, but has gone straight and held down a good job for the past 2 years. He doesn't want to be interviewed in case the publicity leads to him losing that job. Finally, after a 45-minute monologue with no questions, reporters hate those kind of news conferences, we got what should have been the headline news. Sworn testimony from a former prisoner who was in jail with Justin Sneed.
While I was housed near Mr. Sneed, and on more than one occasion, I heard Justin Sneed talk about the murder case that he was imprisoned for and about Richard Glossip. I clearly heard Justin Sneed say in his statements and testimony he set Richard up and that Richard Glossip didn't do anything.
Now this sounded promising. Surely this was an important breakthrough.
I specifically remember Justin on the top rung with a couple of other inmates, laughing with them about setting Richard Glossip up for a crime Richard Glossip didn't do.
But there was a setback too.
If I stop this news conference right now, you're going to start asking about Justine Sneed.
Remember, the daughter of the killer who wrote a letter saying her father wanted to recant? Well, she had been tracked down.
And we got to know Justine Sneed a little bit. Sad situation for her all the way around. She had a tough life, a tough, difficult life. And she said, I'm going to stand by my dad. Well, no matter what he says, I'm going to stand by him. I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to say anything more. And that's how she wants to leave it.
Eventually, the news conference wrapped up. Listening at the back of the hall was David Prater, Oklahoma County's district attorney. His office prosecuted Richard Glossip. He refused an interview request from me a few weeks ago, but boy, he was itching to talk now.
This is not about a legal process. This is a PR campaign. All they're trying to do is abolish the death penalty in the state of Oklahoma and in this country by spreading a bunch of garbage. I was supposed to have a 10 o'clock meeting with the defense team, and I found out late last night that no, there's going to be a press conference here. So if they're so interested in their client's innocence, why are they not in my office or in the governor's office at 10 o'clock in the morning? Why are they doing a press conference and continuing this PR campaign? If in fact that is true, and if in fact these are credible pieces of evidence, these affidavits, then those lawyers are committing malpractice.
Don Knight was just listening to you there. Why don't you go and have a conversation with Don?
I already have. I had a conversation with him before this press conference. I said, we were supposed to be in my office today at 10 o'clock. Why didn't you disclose this stuff to me last Wednesday? Well, he didn't come up with a very good excuse. He just couldn't at that time. We were looking for more and more stuff. I said, yeah, but you had something. Why haven't you filed anything? If you're a lawyer, file documents. Go to the courthouse. Go to the Court of Criminal Appeals. That's what lawyers do. They don't hold press conferences. This is a PR campaign. That's all it is.
It's an argument on procedure, whereas there's a man who's 2 days away from an execution who would like somebody to listen to what he's saying.
Yeah, and guess what? Months ago, 2 years ago in my case, I went through those boxes and tried to determine in my mind to a moral certainty if Mr. Glossip was guilty, because that's what lawyers on the other side of this case had asked me to do at that time. And I did so, and I didn't have any question about it.
At the end of the day, what does it matter to the state whether Richard Glossip is executed in 2 days' time or in 62 days' time?
Why don't you ask the Van Treese family about that? The continuous delays, the constant delays. Why don't you talk about that? We work in the rule of law here, okay? And let me tell you what, personally, it really wouldn't matter to me if I had that much of a question about Mr. Glossip's guilt. But I do not, sir. And at some point, this process has to stop, especially when the defense team is playing games with the process and with you.
But a row between lawyers over proper protocol now seemed to be more important than the actual evidence. Defense attorney Don Knight was now on the defensive.
When this execution is done, Snead is going to be laughing. He's going to be laughing at everybody.
He was supposed to be making the short walk down the corridor, taking the new evidence and handing it over to the governor's staff. But it wasn't ready. It was still at the printers.
We have so much paperwork that we had to front end to try to get this thing going, because if the governor denies us, what are we going to do? We don't have time to sit down and write again.
While we waited, I spoke to Alex Weinz, Governor Mary Fallon's press spokesman. For weeks, he and the governor had refused requests for an interview. So I tried blackmail. Arrange an interview or risk me ambushing the governor at one of her events with awkward questions. That worked. He agreed to sit down for a proper chat.
They're not confident in the information they have, which is why they're fighting this battle through the media and spending more time collecting signatures and asking celebrities to join their PR campaign than actually filing legal briefs, doing legal work, and doing the things that normally you see lawyers do.
On the other hand, you and the governor keep saying the legal process has run its course, so they're having to try to find new ways of getting this information to you.
Well, then the normal trajectory of the appeals process has run its course, but if there was ever new evidence, actually exculpatory, legitimate evidence, our system is set up in a way that they would absolutely be able to take that to a court. A court could delay the execution, it could stop the execution, it could grant a new trial, and it could do all of these things that Governor Fallon can't do. As they have said, and we have said, the only thing Governor Fallon can do is grant a stay of execution for up to 60 days.
So what's going to happen on Wednesday, do you believe?
I believe that unless a court looks at the information that Glossip's attorneys have claimed that they have and that they think is relevant, and unless a court rules to stop the execution or delay it, that the execution will move forward.
And the governor and you will rest easy with your decision, yeah?
I have looked at the evidence, and I think Richard Glossip's guilty.
More than 2 hours later, the new documents from witnesses and experts hired by Richard's attorneys finally arrived. Don Knight walked into the governor's office, and this time it was his turn to be kept waiting. For 10 minutes, he and I, some Glossip family members and campaigners, stood in the reception area. Then, press spokesman Alex Weinz was sent out to collect the folder.
My name's Alex Wentz. I'll
Alex.
take whatever you've got
you.
and bring it to the governor. Nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, you know that I'm one of Richard Glossip's lawyers.
I do.
And we have not to date said anything to the governor, obviously. I think you know that. We've never formally, as his lawyer, said anything about requesting a 60-day stay. That's been bandied about a lot in the press and whatnot, and I know that Governor Fallon has made certain statements about that, but we've never asked, and so now we are. We're asking now. We're giving you evidence of new information. I know that she's concerned about that, And I know that she's a thoughtful person, and I hope that she takes a look at that and lets us know if we can get that 60-day stay.
Absolutely. Well, I'll take it back to her, and I know she will look at it and take it seriously, so thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much.
All right. Appreciate it.
All right.
Around the same time, a letter arrived in the governor's office from a juror in Richard Glossip's second trial. Alex Weinz wasted no time in emailing me a copy. The juror, David Pasilito, wrote to reassure the governor she was doing the right thing in ignoring the pleas to intervene. Part of the letter read,
"We thought Mr. Glossip was cold, calculating, manipulative, and unremorseful, a coward that bid Mr. Sneed to do his dirty work, and that is why he held him to a higher accountability. We did our duty. Now it's time for the state of Oklahoma to do hers. It's time justice be served."
The Van Treese family had also issued a statement to the Tulsa World newspaper.
Execution of Richard Glossip will not bring Barry back or lessen the empty hole left in the lives of those who loved Barry. What it does provide is a sense that justice has been served. We have a right as a family and as citizens of the United States of America to expect justice to be served. Would you not feel the same if this was your loved one?
Tuesday morning, on the north side of the state capitol building in Oklahoma City, there's a monument of the 10 Commandments there. Supporters of Richard Glossip figured that would be as good a place as any to tell the state, "Thou shalt not kill."
I want to thank again the press for your willingness to come and cover our efforts in regards to abolishing the death penalty in Oklahoma.
One of the speakers was Ryan Kiesel from the American Civil Liberties Union.
When our children and grandchildren are old and the names of our leaders are long forgotten, let the name of Richard Glossip ring as a reminder of this sad and tragic moment when we had to even think to assemble here today on the steps of our seat of government and ask this state to spare the life of a man whose guilt is far from proven.
Nate Fields wanted to tell his story. It's similar to Richard's.
I'm here for Richard Glossip because myself, I spent 12 years on Illinois' death row for a crime I didn't commit. Before it came to the light that the judge himself was a crook. I came months within execution, just like Richard Glossip. And it was all a big farce. I did not do the crime, and that's why I'm standing here. I'm asking the governor here to just pause and just think. This man is innocent. Just give it pause, because we all make mistakes. Okay, the judicial system, man, it's comprised of people that's human beings. And as human beings, we all make mistakes. And we feel like this is a mistake. Anytime you take the word of the actual killer, okay, over a righteous, fair, law-abiding citizen, I think that's backwards. I think it shouldn't be that way. It's something strange about this picture that a person who assassinates a person becomes the star witness who can raise his hand on the Bible and say, I'm telling the truth now, and send an innocent person to prison and to death row and have him executed. And that's wrong.
I feel the sun going down. How will you feel when I'm no longer around?
After all the speakers had taken their turn, Richard's best friend Kim Van Atte stood in front of the microphone and said he had a request from Richard. A couple of weeks ago, a Beatles tribute band called Made in Liverpool wrote and recorded a song for him. Richard wanted it to be played.
If not from these prison bars, then God will rest me in his arms, and my liberty no longer bound to lock and key. In God we trust, in your good name, I have no fear, I'm not to blame. Feel the sun going down.
On Richard's behalf, thank you all.
A few minutes later, Richard rang Kim.
But I do want you to chat for a bit, for my sake. Say hi to Ian, since it may be, if things don't go right.
I knew he would only have a couple of hours that evening. I suspected this would be our final conversation.
It's been quite an event today. I wish you could have been here for it.
It was too noisy to record what he told me, but what was more important was what I wanted to say to him.
If I don't get a chance to talk again, I just want to say, thanks very much for talking to me so much over the last few months. Yeah. Okay. I'll hand you back to Kim, Richard. All right. See ya. Bye.
I set off for McAllister and Oklahoma State Penitentiary to do some filming. During the 2-hour drive, an email came through from the governor's office. The new evidence had been reviewed and rejected. The execution would proceed. Governor Fallon was quoted as saying,
"After reviewing it with my legal team, we have determined the vast majority of the limited content they have presented is not new. Furthermore, we find none of the material to be credible evidence of Richard Glossip's innocence."
The statement urged the lawyers to take their claim to a court, the proper place to take new information, she said. I called Don Knight. He was already filing a 34-page document at the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. One of my bosses phoned to ask me whether I was sure I wanted to go through with witnessing the execution. I said I had to. Late substitutions were not allowed. If I didn't go, there would be an empty seat. I didn't want one of the last things Richard saw to be an empty chair because one of the people he asked to be there didn't show up. When we arrived at the prison, Sister Helen Prejean was about to go inside for her final visit. In the past, she's accompanied condemned men right up to the last minute. But Oklahoma changed the rules a year ago. Spiritual advisors are no longer allowed access to prisoners on the day of their execution, just their attorneys. She was angry about that, and she was angry about the governor's statement.
And that is the classic speech at the state level when they go to execute somebody. What did they say? At 6,000 days, why are these out-of-towners coming in and seeking all this publicity and getting in the movie stars and getting in the Nun? And that doesn't deter us. I'll stand behind the law. I'm an Oklahoma governor, and we're gonna proceed with the execution. It was classic.
You're angry?
Yeah, I'm angry. They're gonna kill Richard. All right, I gotta go.
And with that, she was off inside the prison to spend what little time the warden would allow. Here's the other ridiculous thing about how the prison rules are, in my opinion, an affront to human decency. You'll know prisoners are allowed to request a last meal, right? Richard ordered chicken and mash, fish and chips, and a strawberry milkshake. They told him they'd deliver it to his cell at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. is also the time he was allowed his last visit from Sister Helen and Kim Van Atta. So he had the choice of letting his food go cold and eating it later that night, or giving up some of his visiting time. Is that stupid, or cruel, or both? His visitors were allowed to be there until 9 p.m. But that's also the time his phone would be taken away. So he had to tell Kim and Sister Helen to leave an hour earlier, so he still had time left to make calls to his family. But here's the funny thing. Richard was still upbeat. This is what Kim recalls of that visit.
He's, I gotta say, he's in a good place. He's a better place than I am. But that's Richard. He hasn't changed. He doesn't like suddenly become like a saint in prison. This is the Richard that I met 16 years ago.
Just before I went to bed, I tweeted links to my video report on the case and a write-up for our website explaining why I was going to be a witness to the execution. I also posted the official letter from the Department of Corrections inviting me to the prison. I didn't sleep well, maybe 3 hours in total. Too much was going on in my mind. But when I woke up at 5 a.m., I picked up dozens and dozens and dozens of messages on Twitter and email from friends and from complete strangers. All but one or two were positive about Richard and my reporting. That's quite a response from social media when there's always people who don't give a damn and are happy to say incredibly nasty things about a human being. I was genuinely touched. In fact, it made me so emotional I had to stop reading them after a while. Time to focus. We set up to do some live broadcasting outside the prison, but we were in competition with another day of refugee and migrant turmoil in Europe. Earlier, my stories about Richard had been the most viewed on our website, but already the news agenda had switched. Kim Van Atta emailed me. He was upset because I hadn't said in my story that Richard was innocent. I called him. I said, I'm a journalist. I can't say something with that level of certainty if I'm not absolutely sure it's true, even if I would like to have done. I had to qualify my comments. I did say on our website that I believed there was a strong probability he was not guilty. I said I believed there was certainly not enough evidence to justify a death sentence. I said I believe his execution is wrong. Kim was fine. He understood. We agreed he'd talk to me live on air just before we went into the prison together. The media began to gather. Most had been given official accreditation and would enter a macabre ballot for the 5 places in the death chamber reserved for the media. Because the prison had cut the numbers last year from 12 seats for reporters, I was criticised for bypassing the system by becoming an official witness of Richard. One local journalist said on Twitter, "I'd gained access by telling the story how the inmate likes it." I was furious and emailed to tell her so. She accepted she could have worded it better. I think the prison should allow more reporters, like they used to. But you know what? Oklahoma executions were so regular a few years ago that sometimes only a handful of journalists would bother to turn up. Executions in Oklahoma are not big news normally, unless something goes wrong. Or, in Richard Glossip's case, because there was widespread belief that they were killing an innocent man. Kim and I did a live broadcast just before we had to go into the prison. It's a short walk to where we needed to go, but the prison officials insisted that we drive in. They checked my ID. Quick funny aside here. When I visited Richard in prison a couple of weeks ago, I used my British driving licence as my ID. A week later I couldn't find it. I checked with the prison. My licence had spent the week on death row. I said I'd pick it up when I came to the execution. So I used my passport for ID this time. Now, I have a British passport and an Irish one. I used the Irish one. Maybe Richard needed the luck of the Irish. A prison official said, and I remember this so clearly, "This is a horrible event, but we're going to make it as pleasant as possible. We have cookies and coffee waiting for you." I was with Sister Helen, his friends Kim Van Atta, Crystal Martinez, and Kim Belware from the Huffington Post. So, 2 friends, 2 journalists, and a nun. Though the official briefing from the Oklahoma Department of Corrections had listed Kim Belware and I as friends. I may be a reporter, but I do now consider Richard Glossip to be a friend. It was 11:30. Richard was due to die in 3.5 hours. Sister Helen was optimistic. She felt that the attorneys who prepared the court documents had done a good job. I didn't believe her. The speed with which the Oklahoma Governor, Mary Fallin, had rejected the new evidence had convinced me the execution would go ahead. We were shown to a room with water and coffee, though not yet any cookies. We chatted. The mood was reasonably upbeat, given Richard's mood the night before. Sister Helen asked to use the bathroom. I was about to broach the tentative subject of funeral arrangements with Crystal and Kim Van Atta when half a dozen men in suits walked into the room. I recognized one of them as Robert Patton, the director of the Department of Corrections, the big boss. He looked deadly serious. Well, that was to be expected. He shook hands with all of us and said he had something he wanted to say, but when told that Sister Helen was out of the room, he said we should wait. Only a few moments passed when she returned and sat down. Mr. Patton announced there had been a stay of execution. We didn't quite take it in. We needed to repeat it. And then he emphasized that the stay was until September the 30th. There were gasps. And then people began to hug. Tears flowed. It was impossible not to be emotionally involved. I hugged everyone too. I was happy and relieved. They told us politely we needed to leave. We couldn't wait. We drove outside. Then a moment of high farce. The car door was stuck. Sister Helen and I were trapped inside. My cameraman Dickon was about to shoot a live broadcast with a Fox reporter to discuss the breaking news. I was shouting at him to film Sister Helen, Kim and I. Then we finally got out and we just talked and talked.
Sister Helen kept saying to me, it's optimistic, it's good news, and I didn't believe her. You know, God have mercy on me, I didn't believe a nun.
See? You're going to be in trouble.
When they all walked in, I thought we were all going to be arrested or taken away in a shadowy van or something, you know. These guys dressed in black, fanning out around the room like we were some sort of a dangerous group.
You do realize this is great news, but we'd have got that news about 2 minutes earlier if you hadn't gone to the bathroom.
Richard's life was hanging in a balance just because I was going to the bathroom.
We all stood there, didn't we? You know, no idea what. And she comes back and then he says, there's a stay. And I didn't hear anything else. You know what I mean? I didn't hear September 30th. I just heard that there was a stay, and I said, oh.
He had to repeat it a couple of times because we didn't quite take it in.
Yeah.
Listen, after he'd broken the news, you needed a moment of time alone. What was going through your mind?
I just needed to break down a little bit. You know, I can't do it with Richard. You know, I'm not good at doing it with anybody. That's not my nature. I'm a cynical old bastard. And so I just needed to turn away for a minute and kind of, you know, let it go. In fact, I probably was more emotional than I would have been if I had talked to the media in the media center after the execution, because after the execution, as you know, I would have been mad.
Kathleen Lord was there. We'd spoken on the phone but never met. She's the one major character in this story who hasn't yet appeared in these podcasts. She's a Denver-based attorney who's worked on Richard's case for 5 years now. It was she who gave me the video of Justin Sneed's interrogation. She's worked in the background. I thought that the first time I was going to meet her in person was going to be in the death chamber. Instead, here she was outside the jail with a big, big smile on her face.
He's very, very grateful and very happy. He's, what a relief. And it's only 2 weeks, and we hope we can get as much more evidence as we possibly can get. But we're very grateful for the moment, very pleased.
We stepped out when they called us. We stepped out, and they told us there was a stay, and we had to go back in to get the pen and paper that we had in my jacket, and Richard was there, and we said, there's been a stay, and he became ecstatic. He said, yes, and he pounded on the window. He was just so happy. He said, thank you, thank you, thank you, so many times.
The attorneys take a lot of credit. Well, let me give some of that to my fellow reporter, Phil Cross from Fox 25. He's uncovered a lot of new details this past week, like how the medical examiner's evidence at his trial didn't match the autopsy report on how Barry Van Treese died. She told jurors he bled to death. Well, he didn't. He died from blunt trauma. Why is that important? Well, jurors were told that if Richard Glossip had led police to room 102 in good time, Barry Van Treese might have lived. And here's another thing Phil uncovered on the eve of the execution date. The police destroyed evidence from the case even while Richard was still appealing the verdict. Who gave the order? The district attorney's office? Well, no one's saying. Was it just negligent, or was it a cover-up? Listen to Sister Helen.
Phil, you played a real role in this because you were investigating, you're a true investigative journalist that believed and then found the facts and kept raising them up about innocence. And what the governor and the DA missed is they got sealed in their scenario. We did this, it was a fair trial. They never had doubt. They didn't ever allow doubt, but the country could see it, people could see it, and you could see it. And you pursued that. I think you're one of the real heroes today, Phil.
I don't know.
Well,
testing out all the evidence,
That's exactly right.
This is a Global Tel-Link prepaid call from
Richard,
an offender at Oklahoma State Penitentiary.
Later that evening, Richard called and gave me his reaction to the day's events.
I hit the window kind of hard, actually, but I hit the window a few times, and, trying to yell a couple times, and said, oh, yeah, a couple times. And then I thanked them, probably thanked them more than they probably thought I would, but I thanked them about 20 times as quick as I could. And we just had a great time. I mean, it was a lot of fun. They were so excited. I was excited. So it definitely made my day.
Had you given up hope, or did you still think that there was a chance?
No, I didn't give up hope. Matter of fact, at 3:25 in the morning, they came and got me, and they took me down because they have to take you and X-ray you, and then they put you in cell LL, which is down there right next to the execution chamber. But they came and got me, and they took me down there, and the captain looked at me, and he said, so is there hope? I said, oh, hell yeah, there's hope. Plenty of hope. And he just crossed his face, put his two fingers crossed and looked at me and said, I hope for the best, bud. And so, I had hope all that day.
So Richard lives to fight another 14 days, hopefully more. We don't know how the court will rule. They could come back and say, proceed with the execution. Or they could say, this is interesting. This needs further examination. There were only supposed to be 5 episodes of Another Dead Man Walking. I'm very happy to report there will now be a 6th when we have more news. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your messages. The positive comments have been overwhelming. The Richard Glossip story, to be continued.